You're listening to Startup Universe Talks, a podcast where we meet with startup founders, angel investors, and major stakeholders of the startup ecosystem. They let us in on the do's and don'ts of running a startup, their career story, and the process of succeeding as well as failing. In other words, everything of interest to startup nerds. Startup Universe is a massive network of opportunities for EU tech startup founders, connecting them with the best minds of the EU tech community, with unicorn founders, known investors, and experts. We have brought together European countries to join forces and launch startup programs suitable for their nation's tech founders. ESU aims to give access to opportunity for funding and expansion across EU countries. This is Startup Universe Talks. I'm Maritza, and today I'm here with Brendan Rogers, entrepreneur, investor, co-founder of WAG and 2AM VC. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to have you. Could you give a short description of your career?
My name is Brendan Rogers, and I come from the smallest state in America called Rhode Island. And in 2011, I moved to Silicon Valley to become an entrepreneur. My dream was to always build a tech startup, and had a few ventures in Silicon Valley that didn't really work out too well, and but I learned a lot, and then moved down to Los Angeles, where I started a company called WAG, which became the largest on-demand pet service platform in the United States. In the early days, you can think we were Uber for dog walking, and that's kind of how the origin started. And kind of fast forward 5 years, working at WAG and building that business, I decided to take a spontaneous trip to India, which I'm sure we'll get into, and fell in love with India and also the opportunity within India to invest in amazing founders and founders that are solving massive pain points for people. I decided to become an early stage investor focusing on India only. And that's kind of, my journey from 45,000 feet up in less than 30 seconds.
That's a good description of a kind of long process. We have a lot to get into. But can you tell me more about 2AM VC?
Yeah, so 2AM VC is it's actually a U.S. Domiciled fund, but we invest in early stage India only businesses. So if you're a founder building for India, or if you're a founder building in India but selling into the U.S. or Europe, et cetera, those are the founders and companies that we target. It's a early stage pre-seed seed only, where we will invest in all different industries, very agnostic. We'll invest pre-traction, pre-revenue, or we'll invest a little bit later when there's a little bit of traction and revenue. And we love to lead rounds, and we also like to co-invest alongside great other funds and also angels as well in the Indian ecosystem. So it's my partner Herschel Mehta and I. We're the two co-founders of the fund. Happy to share a little bit more about how kind of we met and whatnot. But our focus is really only India. We believe that India is the future of tech, and also the massive Gen Z population within India. Half the people in India are under the age of 28. So we feel like that is a population that is really going to carry the world through technology. And those are the people that we're betting on.
Okay. So you mentioned it, that you could get into the story about how you met your co-founder. I'm curious about it.
Yeah. So in 2019, I started really kind of building my personal brand on LinkedIn, and just really started, doubling down on expanding my network. And I met a individual named Herschel Mehta, which is he was based in Los Angeles, And he was born and raised in LA, but he was telling me about his investor background and track record, and I was very, very impressed. And also just the energy he gave off, you could tell that he, provides so much value to founders and just really cares about um, startups and stuff. So I met with him, and he was telling me about his Indian investments, but also his cousin Sanjay Mehta, which started the one of the most successful accelerators in India called 100x.vc, and also how like Sanjay, was a exited two-time founder and huge angel, writing the first checks in companies like Oyo Rooms and large crypto exchanges called CoinDCX, and just amazing companies. Um, and what was funny is that I got an email one morning from Herschel about 2 or 3 months later, and he was like, "Hey, would you like to come to India for the first 100x demo day in Mumbai?" And something inside of me was like, it was definitely my intuition was like, you should go. I was really at like a crossroads in my life, and without kind of like any thinking, just bought a ticket to India. And it was funny because I messaged him and I was like, hey, I'm going to be coming to this. And he thought that like nobody was going to come. And he actually sent it to a bunch of people. And I was the only person that responded saying, "Oh, I'll come." And he was like, "Do you have a visa?" And I was like, "Yeah, I had no idea you needed a visa to go to India." So like I had to scramble with the embassies, and like, it's a very short last minute trip, but that's how I met Herschel, and that's kind of how our relationship started. We did a couple deals together on the angel side together, where we kind of built some trust with one another, and I think that really helped kind of build that relationship just on a quicker pace. But when I touched down in India, that's when I was just completely excited about the whole opportunity there.
I can imagine. And it's good that you were the one who actually went for the invitation. It turns out to be a good decision in the end. But what is it about India that makes them so unique in this particular field? You mentioned the huge population of Gen Z, but what else is it?
Yeah, so I think like, first and foremost on like a macro trend, we're seeing a lot more buying power within Indians in general. Just more consumers are making more capital, meaning that they get to reinvest that into the ecosystem and stuff like that. So we're just seeing like a kind of a economy shift in a positive direction. But also we're seeing a lot of businesses that are not digitized, or a lot of industries that are not digitized, that are now becoming digitized and getting a ton of like early adoption. So businesses that will work in either the States or wherever, those business models can be translated to India and essentially have adoption. And kind of the core of this is the ability and access to data. So everybody in India that has access to the internet is first being kind of onboarded through their mobile device. And data is fairly cheap in India, so it's opening up a huge TAM of people to get connected to the mobile device. And people that have now access through the phone on social media, and they see people wearing specific clothes. They see people especially the Gen Z population, maybe like investing in cryptocurrency. They're curious of what this is, and like all different types of trends. Those trends are now coming into India, and we're seeing that it's kind of the access is there, and the also ability to get products live happens a lot quicker and stuff like that. So that's like kind of from like a macro lens. And then on like the founder side, I have never met so many founders that are just extremely technical, very passionate, and just love to build. And I think that that's very special, because in the US, I feel like it's very hard. It's hard to meet founders that will give their like life to what they're building and stuff like that. And like you have to really kind of shift through the noise. And I think in India, when I went there, maybe it was just my personal experience, but I just met such passionate individuals that, you know, are just so excited to build and to solve massive pain points for people and stuff like that. So those are some of the macro trends. And you know, kind of lastly, you know, what really excited me early on was seeing companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google and even like companies like Coinbase opening up massive offices, employing way more people, just more capital coming into the ecosystem. And then also on the larger fund size, having a lot of international funds allocating more to India, which so there's just so much more capital coming into the ecosystem. Way bigger businesses are creating more jobs and just having a bigger presence there, which I think is just good signaling.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, I can imagine it must have been very stimulating to see all these very passionate founders that you haven't been in contact with before, because that is like maybe as an investor, that is a huge part of what makes you want to invest in someone when you're meeting with the founders that you really see are so dedicated.
Right, exactly.
But are there, when you are investing with the 2AM VC, what are you looking for? What are some core qualities that you feel is absolutely vital?
Yeah, I think like for the founders, so I get really excited when I speak to founders and they have already put a product live with nothing. And just that just shows so much. So there's like a lot, there's like a couple different things, but I think I would say that now kind of investing for now like a year, I speak to founders that are like, hey, like we haven't raised any capital, but we were able to get this product live, or we were able to, you know, single-handedly go sign up 500 people for this product, or just like really scrappy, staying super lean with and just getting to like a specific like point where like they accomplish something with nothing. I think that is massive. The flip side of that is like, oh, I need money to launch a product. And it's like, well, you know, that doesn't show me that you're like super scrappy, right? So that's like one thing that I'm like, I really look for is like, what have you done so far? Or what have you done maybe in the past? Maybe you built other projects that you like, you know, want to share that like kind of you built either manually or with nothing and kind of got it to a point. Um, Also like, so I think those are like some of the qualities is like from that perspective. I also think like just experience in general is very key. So, you know, working at a startup, you know, say you worked at a startup and it went from, you know, 5 people to 500 people, and you were able to kind of see that kind of 0 to 1 growth. I think that those experiences don't happen often. And I think that people learn a lot and wear many different hats. So, you know, if a founder maybe previously worked at a startup or a startup that became really large and just learned a lot, really trying to dig into that experience, I think that's super helpful as well. Also the ability to like, you know, hire and like bring on co-founders and stuff. Not so much like hire employees, because typically these founders don't have that much capital, but more so like, can you build a team around this idea? And like, how is the team together? Is this because at pre-seed seed, majority of these companies like either pivot, they iterate a ton, and it's like you may have to go through like a couple iterations to kind of get to some sort of like product market fit or whatever it is. And it's like, can this team like stay together? Can this team get like knocked down and stay together? So really kind of peeling back the onion on like, does this team work, et cetera. And then also just like kind of like, are these founders like industry experts? What's cool about being a VC is that I learned so much about new industries on a daily basis. And when I speak to founders that you could tell like they've done the research, they've done, you know, they've just have interviewed people, are just so knowledgeable about the space. You can tell that they put in the time and effort and they truly care about the space that they're building in. You know, which I think is extremely important, especially in the early days when you want to figure out like who your target customer is and, you know, how to figure out your go-to-market strategy, et cetera.
Okay. So can you share, on the other hand, some red flags in founders or in startups in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like my personal red flags, like I said earlier, is like, um, I need money to launch something. I just don't really, I'm not super aligned with that. Things where it's like, oh, we've been doing this business for 4 or 5 years, and that's kind of like, well, and they maybe haven't had that much progress, and it's like really trying to like dig into why, what like products or anything have you like got live to market, even if like nobody has used any of your products or not that many people, like what have you actually built and shipped to where people can use, if there really hasn't been any um like kind of like launch of anything, that's a huge red flag actually. um and then like sometimes I'll see like rounds where like they'll, if I'm not the first check, which, yeah, typically I'm not, typically I'm like not, but like I actually like, it's fun being the very, very first check. But um, say the founder will raise X amount of money, and then it was like 2.5 years ago, and it was like, a pre-seed size round, and really kind of digging in is like, what did you do with that money, and like kind of where has it gotten you, and if there really hasn't been any progress, like things like that. um and Also another thing is like, I think this is my own personal preference, because I had to really kind of um do this, was like if like really understanding if these founders are shameless. I think as a founder, if you're not shameless, you won't win in startups. And by what I mean by that is like, you know reaching out to potential investors, reaching out to potential customers, like just like not caring, like just like, who cares? Like shoot your shot. Like if you send 30 messages and one person gets back to you, like that one person could open up a new door. Founders, I feel like I feel like a lot of times ego really gets in the way with founders, and it obviously comes with experience and stuff like that. And it's easier said than done. But if you like, there's founders that I meet that are like, I don't care. I'll reach out to anyone, and I'll like, and I'm not scared of rejection. And I think that those are really good signaling. Sometimes founders, like, you have to like tell them, oh, you should go do this, you should go do that. And it's almost like, that's like, I'd rather not tell and just have people act. So
Okay, so it's really the being brave enough to not shy away from rejection. Have you had the same mentality for you as a founder?
yeah, I mean, like, look, I never went to Harvard, I never went to Stanford, by any stretch of the imagination. I feel like in the US, I think things are changing a tad, but like typically if you have, experience working at a Facebook or like a Coinbase or something, or Google, whatever, and then you went to Stanford or Harvard, you really have like, you're at the front of the line and the door is open immediately for you. With me, I knew that I had to really kind of fight and like work my way in somehow, whether it was the back door, the front door, or wherever. So I had a lot of kind of, in the early days, it was more so just networking, meeting people, asking for things, trying to give as much value as I, possibly could, even though if it was not that much value, try to. I grew up playing a lot of sports. I played sports in college. I love being on teams. I say this a lot in other podcasts and conferences, is like, what really kind of drove me to startups was the fact that like early on in my whole childhood and into college, played sports, loved like winning together, loved like going through the journey of like losing, but as a team collectively, working towards something. And I think that translated very, very well to startups. So I think inherently I knew and I had the tools to like know that like you have to work for this, and like nothing's just gonna like be handed to you. So I think that actually really, really helped. Um, yeah, I faced that a lot and stuff like that. But I think if you are really passionate about what you're doing, um, and you truly are like doing what you want to do, I feel like it's just being shameless just comes naturally because you're just so excited about what you're doing. So like for me is like I really wanted to build a business so bad and wanted it to like at least have a chance in whatnot. And I think that failing a few times and not going to specific schools or working at specific companies, I knew that like if I'm passionate enough, something will happen.
Mm. Yeah, that's I like that advice, and it's that mentality, as you say, being shameless. When you really believe in something, if somebody turns you down, it doesn't really matter because you have it in the back, so to speak. But as for the more challenging part, is there a particular thing that has been the biggest challenge for you over this journey?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge for me is patience. I think that patience was something that, and I did a Twitter post yesterday or the other day on this, or LinkedIn, I forgot. As founders, even some, not really as investors, but more so founders, it's like founders want things now. They want like to be able to get revenue right away. They want to have all these users right away. They want to have, you know, funding right away. Like everybody wants it now, right? Like, and I think that as you read, TechCrunch, or you're on LinkedIn or Twitter and you see, oh, I raised $30 million. Oh, I hit $1 million ARR, whatever it is. You get jealous. Founders, and like you maybe not jealous, but you get like your ego gets hit where you're like, shit, why isn't this happening to me? Like, why is this company raising $50 million and I'm not? Like, why does this person have 1 million users and I don't? And what it is like, it's patience. It's like you have to stay in your own lane. You have to have put your head down and just keep executing on like what you personally believe will work and and do what you're passionate about. And for me, I built a startup. I moved to Silicon Valley in 2011, and I had failures in startups. The company I helped co-found, is on a rocket ship now, but it wasn't all roses, right? And it's like you go so many years, year after year, and so many ups and downs, and you're just like at a point where you're like, man, like what is this, like what's the end game here? Like it's like, but it's patience, and in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that long of a period. So to answer your question, the biggest challenge for me was to just like take a step back, let things happen the way that they should happen, and have patience. And if you keep working hard, if you keep aligning yourself with the right people, if you keep just kind of staying course, staying focused, things will work out. That's just like how life works, right? And it's funny because like that's kind of how my life has worked out since. So I'm just really kind of reminding myself like to have patience, for sure, has probably been the biggest challenge.
Okay. Yeah. So now you have learned by that, those, maybe it's not a mistake, but you have learned that, okay, I can have patience. I don't have to freak out because it has worked out in the past and it will probably do that again.
Right.
Very good. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I would just say like to founders, like, it's funny because like everybody's like, the VC side it's super interesting. I love investing. I love investing at pre-seed seed. I think it's absolutely an amazing opportunity to give founders an opportunity to do what they love to do. I would just say like, to founders that are, building, is that like entrepreneurship is such a roller coaster where like you could have the lows of lows and the highs of highs. And I've had the highs of highs and I've had the lows of lows. And what's interesting is like people are so excited to start their business, and then they're like so excited to be like, oh, maybe I can sell my business and become really, really rich and have a yacht in Greece, right? Like, but in actuality, the real experience and the real growth and the real memories all happen in between, from the start and the finish. And really understanding that like the journey is the success, and like having those memories and having those experiences. So I always like to tell like founders that like really like enjoy that journey. And I think this goes with everybody in life. Like if you everybody's like thinking into the future, where like, oh whoa, blah blah blah. But like, it's like that quote where it's like, if you think in the past, you're depressed. If you think of the future, you have anxiety. But if you think in the present, you have peace. And I think that like as founders, if you can just really enjoy the moment of building, you'll be able to be that much more successful and stuff like that. And even like I have this tattoo that I got in Indian Sanskrit, and it says every step of the journey is the journey. So I like live by that, and I truly believe that that's a really true statement. So I would say for founders, is really like live and enjoy the moment, because it'll be that much better. You'll be that much better off. So I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, that's a perfect note to end it on. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Startup Universe Talks. If you want to know more about us, go to thestartupuniverse.org and follow us on social media. Thank you for listening.